10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Hello and welcome to the brief and bingeable true crime podcast, 10-Minute Murder. I'm Joe, the host, and thanks for being here. Before we get too deep into today's story, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. When you are subscribed, you get every single episode the moment it's released. And that's 2+ times per week, so you don't have to go searching for the podcast each and every single time you want to listen to it. It's always going to be right there when you subscribe. And also, you'll know when I release the episodes because I post them on social media, and in the show notes of this episode, you'll find all the links to the places you can find 10-Minute Murder on social media. Or if it's easier for you, you can just search in the search bar in whichever social media app that you're trying to find the show in, and it'll pop right up. Just search for 10-Minute Murder, and then boom, it's right there. And lastly, if you would like to get in touch with me personally, you can either do it through direct message on one of those social media platforms, or you can email me directly, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. Now, we often think about serial killers as lone monsters, outcasts of society, unable to love. But sometimes, even these sinister human beings meet their perfect pair and end up taking a to death do us part a little bit too seriously. Ken and Barbie, or Paul Bernardo and his wife Karla Homolka, seem to be perfect for each other in the worst way possible. Some of you have asked why I give the exact birth date of many of the killers we talk about here on 10-Minute Murder, and there are a couple of different reasons. First of all, to give you an idea of their age. That one's pretty simple. But the second one, their horoscope. It sounds funny, but a lot of people are into that kind of thing. I'm personally not. But I don't want to deprive you of the opportunity to diagnose someone as a typical Leo or a Sagittarius acting up, or if someone's giving off heavy Virgo energy, you want to know about that. Personally, again, I don't even get that stuff, but I don't want to deprive you of that information. So, Paul Bernardo, born August 27th, 1964, in Ontario, Canada, to Kenneth and Marilyn Bernardo as the youngest of 3 children. The Bernardos seemed to be a stable, financially well-off family without any visible issues. Those who met Paul in his childhood said he was a pretty happy kid, always had a smile on his face. But the truth was his family was deeply dysfunctional. Paul's father was often abusing his mother, both verbally and physically. Still, even when Kenneth was charged with child molestation in 1975 and rumors circulated about him also sexually abusing his own daughter, Paul didn't seem to care that much. Instead, he maintained his image of a perfect child, always being polite and well-mannered and getting good grades from school. However, the darkness inside him had already started to grow. When Paul was 16 years old, his mother Marilyn dropped a bomb. Kenneth was not Paul's real father. He was actually the result of an extramarital affair. This information caused Paul's behavior to change noticeably, and he started openly insulting his mother, calling her a slob and a whore. And once he moved out from the family home, Paul severed all contact with his parents. And after graduating from maybe the fanciest named school I've ever heard in my entire life, that I'm probably going to mispronounce, Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute in Scarborough. Once he graduated from there, Paul attended the University of Toronto. I can pronounce that one. Paul had grown to be a handsome and charming young man, and he knew how to use those features to lure and manipulate women, not unlike you've heard me talk about Ted Bundy in the past. His sadistic tendencies had come to bloom, and to satisfy his needs, Paul started to pick up women at bars only to humiliate and beat them later. One of Paul's ex-girlfriends even went to the police to report Paul's abuse, but the police did nothing. And so Paul was able to continue, and before long, his desires grew much darker. In 1987, Scarborough was haunted by a series of horrific crimes. On May 4th, a young woman was grabbed and brutally raped close to her parents' house, and within a week, there were 2 more similar attacks. All the women were between the ages of 15 and 21, and in all the cases, the attacks included beatings, verbal abuse, and threats of what would happen if the victim went to the authorities. It was quickly concluded that only one man was behind all the attacks, and local media gave him the name Scarborough Rapist. Behind that moniker was, of course, Paul Bernardo. As unbelievable as it sounds, Paul was able to continue his rampage for almost 5 years without ever being an official suspect. He raped and attempted to rape at least 19 young women, most of them grabbed around bus stops, but at least one of his victims he attacked in her own bedroom. More Ted Bundy vibes from this guy. Some of the victims managed to fight Paul off, and he was eventually questioned by police, and still he was let go. During his reign as the Scarborough Rapist, Paul met a girl, Karla Homolka. In 1987, Karla was 17 years old and Paul was 23 when they met at a pet food convention. Karla was the eldest of 3 children of Dorothy and Karla Homolka. She was born in Ontario on May 4, 1970, and she was described as a pretty, smart, and popular child who loved animals. After graduation in 1988, Karla worked in Thorold Veterinary Clinic as a vet assistant. Like in the case of Paul, nobody could have guessed Karla's true colors from her outward appearance at the time. But she, too, had a dark side. So when the two met, it was like a match made in heaven. Or a match made in hell, to be more accurate. Paul and Karla were instantly attracted to each other, and when they found out they both shared the same sadomasochistic desires, they quickly took roles as master and slave. Karla found Paul's fantasies invigorating. Finally, a change from the boring men that she had dated before. As time went on, the relationship and the violence related to it intensified. Throughout the relationship, Paul also continued raping young women in Scarborough, while Karla was fully aware and approving of her husband's doings. She loved Paul so much that she would do absolutely anything for him, anything at all, even give him her own sister. Eventually, Paul and Karla got engaged on Christmas Eve 1987. And I called him her husband a minute ago, but that's foreshadowing, or an accident on my part, either way you want to look at it. The couple seemed pretty happy, but the truth was, when time passed and they were about 3 years into the relationship, Paul had become bored. And he was also annoyed that Karla had not been a virgin when the two had met. And so now he targeted his attention toward Karla's pretty 15-year-old sister, Tammy. And you would think Karla was upset hearing about Paul's desires, even really outraged. But no. Instead, she told Paul that she wanted him to have her little sister's virginity as a Christmas present. So on December 23, 1990, Karla put animal anesthetics in her sister's drink. Karla had stolen the drugs from the clinic where she worked. Once everyone had gone to bed, Karla and Paul took Tammy to the basement. There, Karla held a rag soaked in the anesthetic, halothane, over Tammy's nose and mouth, ensuring she was unconscious. The couple began raping her, taking turns while recording the whole brutal attack. But then Tammy threw up and started choking. Karla held her sister upside down to help her clear her throat without success. Paul and Karla quickly hid all of the evidence before finally calling for help. Sadly, it was too late. Tammy was taken to the hospital, but she never woke up. Her death was ruled as an accident as a result of choking on vomit from alcohol poisoning. As Tammy was gone, Paul needed a replacement. Paul and Karla got married on June 29, 1991. On that very same day, the remains of 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey were found by a couple canoeing at Lake Gibson. On June 15th, Leslie had been out with her friends and later found herself locked out of her house. Sadly, before being able to wake up her parents, she was kidnapped by Paul and Karla, who abused her for several days. When Leslie's body parts were later found inside concrete blocks, the two were enjoying an extravagant wedding ceremony, which included their entrance in a white horse-drawn carriage. Less than 1 year later, on April 16, 1992, Paul and Karla kidnapped, abused, and killed 15-year-old Kristen French. When her battered body was found in a ditch along a rural road, it didn't take too long for authorities to realize that the two murders were connected. Around this time, Paul had also begun turning his abuse onto Karla, and so securing his downfall. In early 1993, Karla finally left him after Paul attacked her with a flashlight during an argument, leaving her admitted to the hospital with black eyes and broken ribs. Within 2 months, Paul was put under surveillance and his DNA sample was matched for the Scarborough Rapist. He was eventually arrested in February of 1993. Karla immediately lawyered up and quickly portrayed herself as an abuse victim, forced to participate in Paul's brutal crimes for fear of her life. She wanted a deal. She would plead guilty to manslaughter and only be given 12 years in prison. In exchange, she would testify against Paul. The so-called deal with the devil was quickly accepted. The decision backfired when Paul's new lawyer eventually turned in the tapes showcasing their gruesome crimes of the Ken and Barbie killers. It was evident that she was not the victim. Karla had been a willing and eager participant. Still, it was too late, as prosecutors had already made the plea bargain with Karla. Paul was convicted of several offenses, including 2 first-degree murders and 2 aggravated sexual assaults in September 1995. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years in Canada's toughest maximum security prison. He was never convicted of the Scarborough Rapes. In June 2021, after more than 25 years in prison, Paul Bernardo's parole request was denied a second time. Karla served her 12-year sentence and was released July 5, 2005. She eventually married her lawyer's brother. The two now have 3 children together, and Karla has even worked and volunteered at the school where her 2 children attended. In 2006, Karla tried to have her name changed for anonymity purposes. However, her request was denied. And it's no surprise Karla wanted to try to hide herself after so much public attention. The fact that Karla is now completely free, enjoying life, even though she was equally responsible for the crimes, does not sit right with many people. However, others argue that she served her time and deserves her second chance. What do you think? That is 10-Minute Murder for today, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you have a story you would like for me to possibly cover on this podcast, you can send that to me, either on social media, just send it via direct message, or email 10minutemurder@gmail.com. If you are new here, make sure you are subscribed to 10-Minute Murder. Also, if you listen on Apple, a 5-star rate and review will make me super happy. I'm not saying I'll find you and kiss you on the mouth, but I'm not saying I won't. You don't know. Maybe. Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Murder. Have a good night.